Well, good afternoon. It's good to see you again, and I'm glad to be back with you. Last week, I know that you and Tad Bodeman, Rich, talked about a very important topic around how we see ourselves and how we work to keep ourselves healthy, and particularly during this pandemic. But of course, this is an issue for many people all of the time. I like that you touched together on the issue of being good stewards of God's gifts to us of good health and strong bodies. And so today we want to kind of delve a little bit deeper in some of those areas. So I think I want to go ahead again. I'm Pat Ryan, and this is Dr. Rich Cozart, and together we're going to kind of pick up where Tad and Rich went last week in this discussion. So if you can maybe recap it now for the viewing audience, Rich, that would be great.
Sure. It's good to be with all of you again. And last time we basically laid a foundation of some general laws for health. And we established that generally from a Christian worldview. And we laid out, first of all, first law is in terms of health, we want to keep our stress managed at a low level, okay? Because if our stress is not where it ought to be, there can be all kinds of ramifications. After lowering our stress, we talked about rest, proper rest, getting enough sleep, making sure that that is a habitual thing that we're doing, and we're very careful about getting enough sleep. We talked about proper diet, nutritious diet, and how important that is, obviously, to our health. And then the fourth and last thing, we talked about movement and exercise.
Yes.
So we would like you, and we want to keep that in mind, those four laws, those four basic foundational principles for physical health. Very important.
Excellent. Yes. And I was very interested in what you were saying, because I think we all maybe have had times in our lives when we struggled with our own perceptions about who we are and our health. And I guess, my next question to you, Rich, would be, what do you see as some of the danger signs that a person is really at risk with some of their emotional perceptions about their health? What are some of the things that we should be looking for in ourselves and our loved ones?
Sure. And last time we mentioned, when we violate these basic principles or laws of health, there can be this pattern that develops. It can affect our body, and then in turn, it affects our mind or our emotional state. And then if our emotional state gets in a bad place, then that in turn can affect our body. And here's just a very quick illustration, something common that we hear a lot, and we joke a lot. So if I come home and I'm feeling kind of down, feeling bad, well, I might eat a lot of sugary desserts late into the night. All right, so I get out my bag of Oreos and I way overeat, and I eat way into the night. Okay, so I've got this sugar high. I can't go to sleep at my regular time. And so I finally go to bed. I have a short night's sleep. I wake up in the morning, I'm groggy. I feel bad that I ate the way that I did. And so now my mind is a bit more depressed than it was when I started eating the Oreos.
Yeah.
And thus that evening or that day, I feel bad or worse. And so I want to compensate by eating more junk food and maybe not exercising and perhaps ending up not sleeping enough. So the point is that we can get in a destructive cycle of low mood, not treating our body the way we should. And these, excuse the pun, they feed on each other, right? They feed on each other and we spiral down. So the warning signs would be us seeing ourselves doing that,
Yes.
neglecting one of these key areas, and thus we end up in a bad place.
Yeah,
And go ahead, Pat.
I was going to say, it reminds me a lot of some of the clients who I've worked with who have had that same struggle. And, this one woman was telling me, I work really, really hard to try to eat healthy and exercise and get enough rest. And she said, then I go to work and they've got a big box of donuts in the break room. And not only do they have donuts there, but they're like encouraging you to eat them. And she says, and I can feel bad that, well, I'm going to hurt their feelings if I don't have one because they did this sweet gesture of bringing donuts for everyone at work. She said, and it's really hard for me to kind of stand up and say, no, no thanks. I'm just being more careful about what I'm eating, or saying something to take care of myself. And so I think you're right. We have to check ourselves and take a really good look at where our own sense of self and self-worth is in that. And when we find ourselves allowing what others do to influence us, then yeah, I think we're in some trouble there, and that is a warning sign that maybe we need to step back. I love what they talk about, the safety messages that they give you when you're on an airplane as they're taxiing down the runway. And they always say, put on your own oxygen mask first. We need to check ourselves. And when we find ourselves becoming more concerned about what others think or how others may respond to our caring of ourselves, that is a warning sign, I think, for us. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rich.
And I would add from that, that little story you told is often the idea of justification. I've got to eat this way, or I can't exercise, or I can't go to bed on time for these reasons. Social pressure, trying to overwork. I don't have it in my genes, my DNA.
Maybe you have too much in your genes, right?
There you go. Too much. Right. Yeah. So this idea of justification, I can't do these things. I'm not an athlete. I've never been good at self-control. When I see something I really like in terms of food, I don't want to in some way disappoint my coworkers at my job. I don't want to disappoint my family members when we get together, perhaps at holidays and other times. So justification, and then oftentimes justification can lead to denial, like I'm not that bad, or comparison. I'm comparing myself with others. And so there's can be this series of excuses that tends to prop up this bad behavior, and it turns into a lifestyle that can last years or decades.
Yeah, and you touched on something else that I think is important to kind of flush out here, and that is that, okay, so I've blown it for today, I had some donuts, or I had a donut, I'll get back on track tomorrow or next week, or I'll start next Monday. It gives us sort of that out, that little escape that, you give up, you feel discouraged, you just kind of give up. And and I think I hear a lot of people who struggle with weight and overeating say things like, well, it doesn't really matter. I can't do this anyway, which you just said, a defeatist sort of attitude that really does, create a lot of issues and struggles for all of us if we give in to those thoughts, those negative thoughts.
Yes, every one of these non-productive thoughts can be traced back to certain fallacies of thinking. The one you mentioned about, well, I already overate, I might as well go the whole way, is the all or nothing fallacy. The all or nothing fallacy. And for some reason, it's sort of like, a snowball going down a hill and getting bigger and bigger and going faster and faster. And yet, we can stop at any given point and say, now, wait a minute, I can choose to do the right thing.
Yeah. So last week, you and Tad discussed some solutions and methods that address some of the struggles that we all face when we're stressed. And some of us turn to food, some of us turn to other things. But I want to take a little closer look today at some of those solutions and some of those resources and kind of flesh them out a little bit to help our viewing audience. So um, can you talk about some of the things that you have seen that are effective in dealing with some of these issues?
Sure. I would say first for an individual to self-reflect and try to be honest about where they are in terms of health, and do sort of a just an objective, very honest opinion, and say, okay, do I need to do some things? Because obviously there are some people that have what we call a body dysphoria. Body dysphoria is just this idea of a person not seeing themselves in an honest way, thinking they need to lose weight when they really don't, or they need to lose weight and they don't think they do. Right? So let's just be honest, I would say, and let's be reasonable, especially being reasonable, no self-shaming, no unnecessary guilt. I want to be honest about myself. What do I need to do to really improve in these particular areas? So a self-assessment. Then based on the self-assessment, what can be some very practical, reasonable ways that I can begin to change in these areas. And I'm a big advocate, Pat, of just incremental baby steps.
Yes.
Incremental baby steps. It's not like, okay, I need to run a marathon tomorrow. I'm going from 0 to a marathon. And people do that with dieting. People do that with all kinds of things. And they usually crash and burn.
They do. Well, that's why they think they call it crash dieting because, well, the thought is I'm going to just starve myself because I've got to get ready for this event that's coming up and I want to look my best. And so I'm going to just starve myself for a couple of days and try to lose 20 pounds. You may lose the weight if you do some really extreme things and abuse your body that way. But the truth is, you're going to do yourself a huge disfavor in terms of taking care of yourself long term. That isn't, and I think most of us have, experienced that yo-yo dieting. You crash for a little while and then you gain back that weight immediately when you stop, and usually a few more pounds to boot. So yeah, it's. I like the thought of being more intentional and deliberate in our approach to that. What are some of the resources that you have used in the past, Rich, to help people in those situations?
I would say, number one, can I do this on my own? If I can't do it on my own, then I need help. So I need maybe a therapist's help, like a Future and Hope counseling center, like what we do, which could be a counselor and or a life coach. And so I'm going to get help from someone else. They're going to help guide me for accountability purposes. The other way of doing it is with a group. And there's lots of groups out there that help. Some people don't like groups. Some people prefer a one-on-one counseling session. Some people say, I'm going to do it on my own. So whether you can do it on your own or with a counselor or with a group, decide which one might be best. And then it would be the methodology that's employed. What is the methodology? Oftentimes, people overlook some very good, and I would say practical approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy. And for Christians, which can be delivered from a Christian worldview. And personally, that's what I like the best. I don't like the approaches that say, okay, here's the exact type of diet you must do, count calories, buy certain foods, cook them a certain way. To me, that's too burdensome. Yeah. Some people like that, I don't. But cognitive behavioral therapy is an approach that applies in many different ways to our health and can be applied to many different ways when it comes to the consumption of food.
Absolutely. And I think the other part of that I know you and Tad touched on last week in part one, you talked a lot about the, movement, and I think those two things, being attentive and aware about what you're putting into your body and what works for you in terms of healthy eating goes hand in hand with movement and staying in movement. And I love that you guys talked about that. And I also like the concept that you brought up last week about our bodies being a temple of the Holy Spirit, and that alone, I would hope would be incentive for many of us to be able to care for ourselves and take care of the temple in a form of being ready for whatever God has planned for us to do with our good health and our strength and our awareness and emotional stability. All of those things come into play, I think, in order for us to have that sense of readiness before the Lord. And I think that's an important incentive for those of us who subscribe to that theology.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I would say, Pat, just briefly here, that we're all motivated in different ways. A Christian person might find their greatest motivation in realizing these Christian truths about being the temple of the Holy Spirit. But let's also keep in mind there's other motivations, like I want to live a long and healthy life that's generally pain-free. Okay, so that means these things that we're talking about. Next motivation, I want to look good as I can. I want to be proud of the way I look to my spouse or my family. I want to have energy at work. I want to sleep better. All of these things, there's several. And as you embark on becoming healthier, find the things that motivate you the most and keep them at the forefront of your mind. And that will help to motivate.
I couldn't agree more. I love that you have introduced the CBT ways of addressing some of these issues. And what we want to do next week is maybe delve a little deeper into some of that and what that looks like, and really point the viewing audience into a direction where they can discover these resources and be able to benefit from these resources, to their better health, to their stronger, healthier bodies and stronger, healthier emotional lives. So yeah, out there, as you're watching this, I hope this has been helpful to you. It's a subject that I think we all are interested in, that is important to all of us for various reasons and various motivations, as you just mentioned, Rich. And again, we are here to help in any way that we can. Our contact information is posted on this podcast. Please don't hesitate to contact us if there's some ways that we can help you. And so we're going to close this down for now and pick this up with part 3 next week in our podcast. Thank you so much, Rich, for your insights here. And thank you out there for tuning in and watching us. We hope to see you again next week. Bye for now. Rich, do you want to say anything to close out?
It's good to be with you today, and we just look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.